What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores ANT. Find me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PROANT. I don't know why the banner says Toodles. We just started, so it needs to say the intro. In this edition of Disguise Coverage, we will be diving into not necessarily the current state of the Buffalo Bills, kind of the current state of the Buffalo Bills, but this idea of, the mantra that's been attached to this Bills team really for the past several years, especially as they've started to improve and progress in what they are as a team and as a franchise. It started out as being playoff caliber, and then once, making the playoffs became a regularity, we heard the mantra of championship caliber. We hear Sean McDermott preach it, during training camp, in the preseason, throughout the regular season. We hear it in pressers. We hear it in behind the scenes locker room stuff. We heard it during Hard Knocks and all those pieces. It's something that they continuously bang the drum for. Sean McDermott loves his, mantras and sayings, and this is one that has been, significantly attached to this team. I think that one, along with, everybody eats, although that's kind of backfired maybe potentially recently. And so I wanted to take that notion of championship caliber and apply it to this Buffalo Bills team for the rest of 2025 and potentially beyond, given what we've seen through these first 9 games, through these first 10 weeks, for what we saw, this past week against Miami, after coming off a really impressive performance against the Chiefs, that coming on the heels of, a victory against Carolina, the bye week, 2 disappointing performances against the Falcons and the Patriots. Is this team championship caliber for 2025? Are they championship caliber for beyond? What stands in the way of being them championship caliber for 2025 and or beyond? What fixes are there? Essentially kind of diving into their flaws, the potential fixes, vulnerabilities, deficiencies of this team from a roster standpoint, from a schematic standpoint, maybe even from a front office standpoint. And I thought this would be a fun conversation, or maybe not so fun conversation to have, given, where the Bills currently stand, again, after a disappointing, not only loss, and I think this is a good comment here from Charles, who I think, put it really well, who said, for me, it's less that they lost and more how they lost. The offense looks a mess when the run game isn't working, and that's the healthy side. We need to pick up the slack. Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I thought that was really succinctly said. It wasn't necessarily for me, and despite the fact I'm very calm, I'm pretty frustrated with this team, but for me, the Miami loss, it was less that they lost and more how they lost. I've said it, throughout the past couple of seasons, even though the Bills have had this strong record and, win-loss performance, or record, I should say, against the Miami Dolphins in the Allen era and the McDermott era, Miami's played them tough more often than not. And the Bills have had some games where the final score, I don't think, is necessarily indicative of how close the game is. I thought the Dolphins played the Bills tough in week 3, and that game really changed on the heels of the penalty on the punt after Miami had stopped the Bills, I think, for 3 consecutive drives in a row, and that game ended up 31-21. So I didn't think this game would be a blowout, even with Miami trading Jalen Phillips and kind of, pushing the eject button on this season. I didn't think it would be as easy as a lot of people were making it out to be, but it was more how they lost. It was more of the performance. It was just the malaise that seemed to exist over this team to start. It was how stuck in the mud they looked offensively, and then a culmination of a lot of the issues that, and I'm not, patting myself on the back here at all, but a lot of the issues that I spoke about or, talked about from a worrisome standpoint this offseason, a lot of them continuing to kind of come full circle, and those chickens continuing to come home to roost. And we saw a bunch of them in this game, and it's a frustrating spot to be in if you're a Bills fan, depending on what any type of expectation or hope you had for this team. I saw that. So again, I thought this would be a nice episode to kind of dive into these pieces and these thoughts and these things from my perspective, and of course, from your perspective. As always, I realized I forgot to do my banners that I'm going to be putting up here. So as I start to type these things, I am going to speak to you folks. Any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything that is on your mind. We always try to make this show as engaging and as back and forth as possible, especially when I do the solo episodes with no guests. So questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything that you folks have on your mind, whatever you got, put it into the live chat. I will bring up everything as much as humanly and physically possible. I want to, again, make this episode as engaging as possible. I have my thoughts, obviously, but I know, especially with times like this where, we've got a lot of thoughts, a lot of concerns, all these pieces. I think it's good always trying to get some things off of everybody's chest and maybe provide a little group therapy as we go forward a little bit. I'm going to grab some thoughts from the chat as we start to get into things here. Bob, I laughed at this earlier. Bob said the KC game got me off rubbing alcohol, straight up, no chaser. However, after the Miami fiasco, I'm on a 2019 Tuscany Coastal aftershave heater, opulent yet a not too complex minerality to it. Well, that's so verbose. Well done. Well done. Sespinar says, please tell me you are not a Dable truther. I feel like no one remembers or has seen Dable without an elite defense and a top 3 NFL wide receiver. I'm not necessarily a Dable truther. I'm open to the idea of changes offensively, but I'm not necessarily on the Dable train. I know a lot of folks immediately wanted him brought back in. I don't see that happening unless, I feel like if you bring Dable in, that means Brady is out there. Dable and Joe Brady's identities or philosophies offensively, I don't think really mesh well with one another. So if you're bringing Dable in, I think that either means Brady is out soon or definitely out at the end of the year. But if they continue to do good, you wouldn't necessarily jettison or want to put that in his brain, or maybe you do want to put that Beane in his bonnet. I don't know. But I'm not necessarily a Dable truther from the perspective of dropping him into this team and it's a cure-all and everything goes by great. Especially when you look at what the Giants have been the past several years. Him failing to get Malik Neighbors the ball against the Chiefs, and just at other times, struggling to get Neighbors the ball, even to the point where Neighbors went to the media last year, and I think maybe even this year, talking about how it's not the quarterback and kind of referencing it's the offense or it's Dable or it's the design. The Giants were such a mess offensively to a lot of degree. And, there were times where they were really sluggish when he was here in Buffalo. I know how he went out on a high note. But I feel like, a lot of people are just choosing to remember the good and not how angry they were at a lot of times, especially that Jags game. But no, I'm not a Dable truther. I wouldn't be completely against him coming in. I don't think it jives with where this team is right now, culturally or on the offensive side of the ball. So I just don't really think it's happening. And I don't think it necessarily makes a lot of sense unless it means you're getting rid of Joe Brady soon. And I don't think that's the case right now. And even if it was going from Brady to Dable, that offense, that system, I don't think it's a seamless fit at this point. But yeah, there are a lot of people that are on that bandwagon. I get it. Peter says the problem is the scheme, pure and simple. Brady isn't it. Give him the next game with an ultimatum to get his crap together, or he gets the boot and Cromer gets an interim promotion. Promote from within. I like the idea. Aaron Cromer just, his crusty offensive line position. I think he's one of the better assistant coaches in the league. I forget when he was last let's go to the internet. I forget when he was last an OC. I think it was for the Bears. Yeah, he was the OC. Yeah, he was the OC for the Bears from 2013 to 2014. And then O-line coach with the Bills, O-line coach with the Rams, run game coordinator and O-line coach with the Rams, and then with the Bills from 2022 through the present. Cromer's an interesting idea. Yeah, I don't. We're going to get into this piece with Brady. It's such a mess offensively. I'm frustrated. Oh, appreciate this from Esther saying, finally, I've been waiting for your video. And thank you very much. Richard thinks this is a great comment, or a great topic for today, I should say. Darth Brooks, I like that. Well done. Well done with my intro and you putting in there. Pop saying, when did Tua learn to throw a long pass? He kind of always has. He usually just hangs it up a little bit too much, but he uncorked a couple good ones against the Bills and uncorked a couple bad ones, kind of par for the course, unfortunately. Charles says there's basically an umbrella over the top of the offense of about 20 yards. We're going to talk about that. Pop says energy on defense looks so good for 2 weeks with Hoyt. What a blessed 2 weeks those were. Peter says Josh had Keon on 2 deep throws and shanked them both. Yeah, he chucked one a little bit too far to the sideline when Keon ended side leverage and then underthrew him on another. Comment here. There was plenty of folks in the chats on various podcasts, including myself, that couldn't wait for Dable to be gone. Yeah, it's funny how time heals all wounds. apparently when it comes to Brian Daboll or the offense. I also think it's funny too how a lot of, not necessarily funny, but how a lot of the frustrations with the Bills offense and the comments from a lot of fans mirror the same comments that were made about the offense under Dorsey and similar comments made about Dorsey, even though he and Brady are two different style of coaches. And I also think it's funny to kind of hear that and see that and recognize what's the constant in that situation and what's not. Fair comment here. Groundhog Day 2023 season feels just like after the Denver game in 2023. Coach Cheech says, are our receivers that bad, or is the passing scheme the real problem? Has Joe Brady ever put together a good passing offense in the NFL? I'm going to talk about this a bit as we go forward, but I think everything that's wrong with the offense is a multitude of things and a combination of all of them. I think Joe Brady's gotten a bit predictable in his formations and in his play calls and in his concepts and presentation, pre-snap presentation. I think the talent at wide receiver isn't necessarily built to support having to chuck it around 30 to 40 times a game. I also think it's not built to put fear into defenses and scare them off from selling out against the run. I also think Josh Allen hasn't been a strong version of himself this year from a decision-making standpoint and from an overall play standpoint. I think he's playing a bit skittish mentally in the pocket on some of his decisions, where he's looking, where his eyes are going, what he's doing pre-snap, what he's doing post-snap, even setting protections. So I think it's a combination and a multitude of things. I don't think the Bills receivers are bad. I don't think that they strike fear into the opposing defense's hearts on a week-to-week basis. I don't think they have a receiving core that can consistently win out on the outside and or deep, especially when you look at the guys that are getting most of the snaps. I'm going to put that on the back burner now because I have follow-up pieces for that on some fixes for what they can do going forward. Damn, Connor says, big intrusive thought. Allen is a coordinator killer who goes through 2 to 3 year cycles because inconsistencies and slumps that he goes through. I think that's a very interesting thought. But James says over under 2.5. How many times Billy Buffalo falls to his knees? I'm taking to the under. Charles says they got to do something about the run pass thing out of shotgun versus under center. We are going to talk about that. Renee says, is Josh Allen just hesitant to throw it to a receiver unless they're wide open? I see other teams making completions to players that are covered, and their wide receivers aren't great either. I will say, because we're going to talk about this again as we go forward, I have a segment for this, so I don't want to give too much of it away right now. But I will say Allen, over the course of his career, has preferred definitive and declarative separators. That's why them drafting Keon Coleman, him wanting Keon Coleman was an interesting thought because they really hadn't had like a power forward at wide receiver that's worked well with Allen. The last kind of dudes that they had was early in his career. That didn't work out so great, but you didn't know if that's because it was Allen was still developing or because he doesn't work well with that type of skill set or those traits. And the guys that he's worked best with, the top two, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley. So you're looking at premier route runners, premier separators, guys that can beat man, guys that understand how to read a defense. And again, more importantly, guys who can win and separate quickly and declaratively. Guys that when they get open, it's air traffic controllers waving you on through like, yep, you're wide open, give me the ball. They don't have those type of dudes right now. They kind of have it a little bit in some guys, and those are the guys that Allen prefers to go to. But I think to a degree, yeah, Allen's not necessarily a big, huge anticipatory thrower type of dude. He's not, okay, you're making your break, let me throw it now. He's not like the Matthew Stafford type of thrower. He is a little bit like, let's see it open. Let's see it clear. I can be a little late if I need to be because I have a cannon for an arm and I can fire it in there. I don't think he's necessarily, blanket statement hesitant to throw it until they're wide open, but I do think he prefers, quick declarative separators a la Stephon Diggs, a la Cole Beasley, two of his better targets throughout his career. Bob says, let's not forget Daboll had his struggles as well. He was feeling the heat. Oh, we got a super chat. I got to go. Rick, thank you very much for being here. And thank you for the super chat. I appreciate you. Rick says, I still think the Bills can beat anyone. The Miami loss is frustrating because they were inconsistent and lazy. That's not championship DNA. I completely agree. I think the type of loss is frustrating, ties a little bit into some of the Sean McDermott concerns, which I'm going to get into on the back end of this episode. But I agree with your first statement. I still do think the Bills can beat anyone. It just becomes more of a, toss-up now in terms of, are you going to get their best or are you going to get their worst? And is their best good enough? And how bad is their worst? And you kind of play that game week to week. I still think this team is a championship contender in the AFC because of how open and wide open, I should say, the AFC is this year. But we're going to get into a lot of those pieces. But I think that's a very fair comment from you, Rick. And again, thank you for being here and thank you for the super chat. What does the comment here? What does Khalil Shakir do best? Run after catch. Getting the ball in Khalil Shakir's hands and letting him go to work. Getting the ball in Khalil Shakir's hands, and he is like a running back once he has the ball in his hands. It's contact balance. It's elusiveness. It's physicality, break tackle ability. He's got some juice. It's just so many things. I made this comment before, I think on the show, but I've said it on social. He and Bucky Irving, the running back for the Buccaneers, who's awesome, they look like the same person with the ball when the ball is in their hands. Khalil Shakir is a running back once he gets the ball in his hands. So what he does best is yards after catch. I do think he's a solid route runner, but his best thing is yards after catch. So get him the ball quickly and let him do work. Jose says, do you think Palmer and Shakir need to be the focal point now that Kincaid is out? Yes. I also think they need to make another tweak, which is something I'm going to mention in one of my segments later. What else? Joey says, I just hate seeing Josh play with this lack of confidence, like he doesn't want to make a mistake. Yeah, that's part of the skittishness that I mentioned. You guys did an episode on Allen and wide receivers not connecting. If a guy gets open on a go route on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your confidence Allen hits them? Like throws it deep and completes it deep? I'm at like 45% right now, maybe 50. 1, because I don't know if he's going to pull the trigger deep. 2, he hasn't been that great of a deep ball thrower going back to 2023. So I need to see the sample size before I get more confident. Charles says it's the scheme. They got fooled by Josh playing the most efficient last year to be perfect, and he mostly did. Not a sustainable formula. They still need the big plays. Yep, it's hard to just stay efficient, matriculate. Zenter says, Allen's accuracy is off this year. Not sure why we never throw a long ball. Even if the success rates are low, we still need to attempt them. We are too predictable without a deep threat. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I hate continuing to say, like, that's in a lot of my thoughts later, but I think that's a very fair statement. Is it a lack of skill set or usage? Not just with the offense, but I just feel like we get certain players and we expect them to be used in a certain way, and they use them in a more lackluster way. Very fair thought. Bob says Yak was an issue they wanted to improve. Problem is, as you pointed out, Josh needs a target, a hip, a chest, etc. to throw to. Very fair. Good comment here. From Adventures of Stephen Laurie. Bills have a tendency to play to the level of their opponent. Yes, that is both good and bad. This is a good one from Pops, who says, last couple games, it seems like when Allen decides to run, he's getting sacked at the start. Yeah, his pressure to sack rate has gone up this year by about 8 or 9 percentage points, which is a lot for him. Last year, he was the best quarterback in the league in terms of not allowing pressures to be converted to sacks. This year, he's more like middle of the pack at around like 18%. It's something that it seems like he's regressed in, whether it's the time that he decides to run or not being able to get away from defensive linemen and linebackers like he traditionally has. Yeah, it's been frustrating to see. It's been frustrating to see. And then Charles mentioned it. Yeah, like Shakir, he's a glorified screen catcher, and he's so much better than that. I do agree. Well, I see this comment here from Alvy. Doesn't seem like the wide receivers aren't running full speed on a lot of snaps. We're going to get into that as we go forward. Let's start to get into that piece. The first thing I want to talk about, I've seen this come up a lot. This is more for not necessarily beyond, but kind of 2026 and beyond, tying into this year. I want to talk about several contracts and several players that are tied to those contracts, because it's a comment that's come up a lot in the shows, on social. I wanted to dive into it a bit. I want to start with Terrell Bernard. He, based on his contract and his extension this year, and this part of the reason why I want to start with him is because so much of the conversation has been, the extensions this year. This offseason, Bernard, Rousseau, Benford, Shakir. Shakir is probably playing the best out of all 4 of those guys, but he's not. But there's questions around his usage, as multiple of you have noted in the chat. Benford isn't playing to the level we've seen him play the past couple of years, especially last year. Rousseau was banged up earlier this year. He's gotten better, but he's still not looking necessarily like the edge one that they paid him to be. Whether you think he could still ascend to that or not, a different conversation. But Bernard, I think, is the one who has played the worst out of all of those extension players. Honestly, one of the worst players on the defense this year. Now, I want to say he looks injured. I'm fairly confident that he's injured. You can just tell the way he's moving. I mentioned earlier on social, he just looks like he's running in quicksand or like he's running in concrete or he's got cement feet. His change of direction isn't there. Now you're also getting some, poor run fits from a mental standpoint. You're getting some poor decisions and movement and coverage. And how much of that is tied to the injury, I don't know. So the injury is a big variable, but any way you slice it, he's not playing good this year. You're not getting rid of Terrell Bernard next year or the year after. You just paid him. He was a good player for you last year. He's one of your captains. So just from that standpoint, you're not getting rid of him. And then his cap hits, you're also not getting rid of him. Next year, he's only got a cap hit of a cap hit of 5.472 mil, but he's got a dead cap hit of 11.8. Then he's got a higher cap hit in 2027. The dead cap is too much. You're not getting rid of him. There is a potential out in 2028 where he has a cap hit of 12 mil, but a dead cap of 2.4 mil pre or post June 1st cut. If you give him post June 1st designation, you could spread the cap hit over 2028 and 2029. That'll save you $10.8 million post June 1st, 9.6 pre June 1st. So there is a potential out 3 years from now, which I also think is fair to kind of see next year, the year after. How does he recover from this injury? What do you get from the rest of this year? I see the conversation on a lot of sides when it comes to Bernard of he's injured, he'll be fine, versus other people saying he's too small, he's too slight, he's regressed. Last year was a flash in the pan. However you slice it, you need proper sample size because of just the position that he plays and the trajectory that he's been on. But in addition to that, the injury again this year, I think muddies a ton of what you have going on. But in the future, again, it's going to suck if he really has regressed to this point, and in 2026 and 2027, his contract is an albatross. You can get out, although it's not ideal, but there is a good out in 2028 for him. Again, he's been poor this year, but that injury is a variable. So unfortunately, you got to see how he does next year, and then you go from there when it comes to his deal. The next two, I think, are both players that have a high chance of being gone this upcoming offseason. The first is Dawson Knox. He has the second highest cap hit from a percentage standpoint this year on the Bills at 5.22%. It's a cap hit of $14.568 million. That looks worse with every passing week. That Dawson Knox deal, you're just not getting the return on investment you want. Next year, his cap hit raises to $17 million, but a post June 1st release or trade, it saves $12 million. You get a dead cap hit of 5.068 million in 2026 and 2.336 in June 2027. If you're able to spread that out and do the post June 1st deal, I think he's gone. I do think he's more valuable than it seems with what he offers as an inline tight end and how much Dawson Knox doesn't offer you in terms of being an inline tight end. I think Knox is a good bridge between Kincaid and Hawes. He's not the receiver that Kincaid is, but he's a better blocker than Kincaid, and he can live in line. He's not the inline blocker and force that Jackson Hawes is, but he's a more viable receiving target and threat. So he kind of lives in the darkness and the light and splits the difference. And I do think that has value because Kincaid cannot line up in line or really attach to the formation in any way that you really need him to from a meaningful standpoint. But paying a guy that much for that role is not ideal right now with this team and where they need going forward. So there's a good out for Dawson Knox this upcoming offseason. Same thing can be said for Curtis Samuel. 7th highest cap hit from a percent standpoint this year at 3.25%. He's got a cap hit of essentially $9.1 million. There's, again, like Knox, an out next offseason. He has a cap hit of 9.725, but a post-June 1st release of $8 million in savings, and then a 1.725 dead cap in 2026 and 2027. You spread that out. You can designate up to 2 post-June 1st cuts. I think Knox will be one, and I think Samuel will be the other. I think Samuel is the most likely, mainly because, again, tight end is wonky with what Kincaid is, and we also know, I'm not trying to play the politic card, but Knox is really good friends with Josh Allen, so maybe that plays a role in him not going anywhere. Samuel's just, you're not getting that return on investment from Samuel. And for whatever reason, despite the fact that Joe Brady had him in Carolina and he was productive and had his best season with Joe Brady in Carolina, the Bills don't seem to want him or know how to use him on the offense. Curtis Samuel, that is. So I don't think you're going to continue to pay a guy, essentially $10 million next year from a cap hit standpoint to be your wide receiver 4 or 5 when it comes to targets and snap share. That just doesn't make sense for this team. So I think Samuel is likely gone. I think Knox, I don't want to say should, but I think Knox should probably be gone as well. Like, again, he's going to have where is it? Yeah, he's going to have a cap hit of essentially $17.1 million next year. That's just crazy for a guy who's like kind of your tight end 2, but maybe kind of tight end 1, but he doesn't really offer you tight end 1 upside. It's tough. You could, as Claude says in the comments, you could potentially restructure him. It's just going to get messy. I do, again, think him being really good friends with Allen and close with Allen will play a role. We'll see just how much. But I wanted to mention those 3 contracts because of how much the conversation is centered around that, of like they're screwed for the future because of how much they have to pay Allen and then how much money they've sunk into Bernard and Benford and Shakir and Rousseau. Rousseau's not going anywhere. I still think he can improve. Shakir's not going anywhere. I think he still can improve. Benford is not going anywhere. I still think he'll get better and back to where he was. I think Bernard will end up being fine as well. Again, I do think a lot of the poor play this year, unfortunately, is tied to the injury. Now, I wasn't as high on him as a lot of people were last year. I know a lot of folks were kind of anointing him as one of the best linebackers in the league. I didn't think he was that level, but I think he's a solid player. I think he was deserving of that extension given the role that he played in this defense. And I do think a lot of his regression, though extreme, is due to injury. And at the very least, you have to get the proper sample size, let him get healthy, let that play out, and see what he is going forward. And I think you'll end up being fine. But worst case scenario, again, for Bernard, you have an out in 2028. I know that's not ideal for a lot of folks, but you do have a potential out for that. And I see some people asking comments. Yeah, you could potentially restructure Knox. I don't know how likely it is. I have to dive into his cap, contract more from how it's actually laid out in terms of the guarantees and all the details of it. But just off the raw pre-post June 1st cut, dead cap hit, savings, all that, he's a likely cut candidate, or at the very least a restructure candidate. It just doesn't, but I think cut makes a lot more sense. It's tough. But again, this is the last time, not the last time I'm going to mention it because we'll speak about a little point with this or later. It is tough because you're going to sit there and say, well, you've got Hawes and you got Kincaid. You can't really pay Dawson Knox what you're paying him because you've got these 3 tight ends. But Kincaid can't really be used as a true tight end because he can't be lined up attached to the formation. Because if he is, he's either got to run a route or it's an advantage for the defense because he can't hold up and block defensive ends or edges or linebackers. Like, that's a mismatch. So you either have to run away from his side, and again, that's a teller of tendency. You still have to also hope that he holds up on the backside, or you can run the risk of running to his side, but then it's going to be advantage defense because, again, him versus defensive end or an edge is a mismatch. It's just there's a lot of complications schematically and from a formation and alignment and usage perspective. So like you do need Dawson Knox and what he offers and being in that kind of middle of being a blocker. Like, he's good enough to be in line as a tight end and block against a variety of body types, including defensive ends, edges, and big backers. And he's also good enough to run routes and function in the pass game. He's not a plus player at either, but he's good enough to function in both worlds. You don't really have that with Kincaid. You don't really have that with Hawes, although I think Hawes can be a better receiving threat than he gets credit for. But Knox is important. His type of tight end is important. I just don't think you can pay what you're paying for that. And I think you potentially find that role on the open market or in the draft potentially, even though tight end is a position that takes longer to develop, so on and so forth. But it's just, you can't commit $17.1 million to Dawson Knox next year. I mean, you can. Literally, like in theory, you can. I just don't recommend it and don't think you should. Okay. As fair comment here. Yeah, there will be free agent tight ends available that can do what Knox is doing now for less money. Yeah, you essentially just need a tight end who is functional as a run blocker against any and every body type, and then also functional as a pass catcher. You can find guys who can do that role, and they're not going to cost you $17 million in cap hit, unfortunately, for Dawson Knox. Now, this next segment, there's a multitude of pieces built into this one. So I want to talk about the contracts from a future perspective because I know that's been a focus on a lot of folks' minds with how poor the play has been from a lot of these guys who got extensions last year and what the Bills' contract situation is, cap situation is in general, how much it hinders them in going for trades, how much it hinders them in free agency. And I think that's very fair. So that's why I wanted to lead with that point. This next one is a multitude of segments here. I just labeled it 2025 improvement / hope. So these are things that the Bills can realistically do for 2025 to improve themselves this year. Hot Wheels Corvette says, the Bills not knowing how to use Curtis Samuel is crazy to me. Didn't Joe Brady want us to get him? You would think so because Brady was the OC full-time when they signed Samuel last year and brought him in. Brady had him in Carolina. It was Samuel's most productive year as a pro. You would think those two things would join together and mean that he wanted Samuel here and was going to use him and get good production from him. And that hasn't been the case for whatever reason. We're going to talk about that more in a bit. So again, this segment is focused on improvements that they can make this year to kind of tweak some things, fix some things, kind of mitigate some of the deficiencies and vulnerabilities they have, kind of mitigate some of the flaws that they have and or could get magnified even further. So that's what we're going to focus on here. Again, as if you folks have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns throughout these segments, feel free to keep putting them in. Or if there's something you think will help this team or something you're concerned about, whatever you got, put it into the chat. The first thing I want to talk about, and this is the lowest hanging fruit. That's why I want to lead off with it. Getting healthy. That will help this team tremendously. Now, I don't say that from a standpoint of it's a cure-all and it makes everything better, but getting healthy defensively and offensively now at this point will significantly help this team. Defensively, you get TJ Sanders back, you get Christian Benford back, again, even though he has regressed a bit this year. TJ Sanders, I don't think he was necessarily peaking to the level that a lot of folks are making it out to be before he got hurt. It was like, man, he was playing some great ball before he went down. I don't think that was the case, but I do think he's better than the practice squad guys that you have coming up. Unfortunately, he's not going to help you with the run defense woes that you have inside, but that's how they chose to build the interior. And so it is what it is. So getting Benford back, getting Sanders back, Shaq Thompson back, I think is very important for depth and potential injuries that will likely happen again at some point to Milano or Bernard's injury or injuries get worse and he has to go down. Dory Williams is playing banged up. So I think it's important to have Shaq there for depth. More importantly, I think Shaq Thompson has been their best linebacker this year. I don't think that thought is unique to me. I think he's their best linebacker right now when healthy. I also think you get Shaq Thompson back and you sit Bernard and you let him heal up. I think he's playing banged up, and I don't think he's playing banged up from, a hurt standpoint. I think he's legitimately injured and he's trying to gut through it. They need to sit him and let him rest. I don't know if that'll fix what he has going on. I don't know how severe his injury is. I don't know if it's an IR situation, end of the year situation, rest a couple weeks situation. Obviously, he's playing through it now, so you would think it's not end of the year or IR worthy, but stranger things have happened. I think you get Shaq Thompson back and you sit Bernard and you let him rest as much as you can down the stretch and you have a healthy version of him, hopefully for the playoffs. So I think, but worst case scenario is you get Shaq Thompson back and he provides you quality depth. Should Bernard's injury get worse and you have to, excuse him from the lineup, or Milano gets banged up again, or even Dorian, because you're going to face some teams where you're going to need base. You're going to need 3 linebackers out there, and I want Shaq Thompson there. But again, he's been their best linebacker this year, and he's currently their best linebacker. You get A.J. Epinesa back. You get Taron Johnson back. On the offensive side of the ball, you get Josh Palmer. You get Dalton Kincaid. Now, again, I don't think these returning players are a cure-all, and I do think they're still going to have vulnerabilities. Again, I even talking on the interior, like getting TJ Sanders back is really helpful, but it's not going to cure the run defense issues in the spine. Like, it's just not. But he's a better player than the practice squad guys they've been relying on and having to use because of the injuries there. And again, it's not a cure-all. They're still going to have vulnerabilities, but having a multitude of their better players out matters a lot. Even if you hate Brandon Beane and his roster development, even if you hate Sean McDermott and you think he's terrible and should get fired, having to rely on depth and practice squad guys is a hindrance to any team. Now, you could play devil's advocate and be like, yeah, well, it's their fault for getting these guys or playing these guys or paying these guys or doing whatever. I can't convince you otherwise of that, but having a multitude of their better players out matters a lot on both sides of the ball, especially considering a bunch of those better players are at premium positions and positions that are important. So again, getting those guys back will raise the floor of the offense and defense, and I think that will help. The next piece I want to talk about here, I keep stumbling over myself because it's the same word. They need more Curtis Samuel and more Elijah Moore. We are at a spot now where the Buffalo Bills offense has kind of been found out a little bit. And we're going to talk about that further as we go forward. It was mentioned earlier in the chat here. I mentioned it throughout the offseason. Offseason is one of my biggest concerns. If you stop the Bills' run game or slow it down, this offense is nuked. Like, that's just what it is at this point. They do not have guys on the outside that strike fear into defenses. They do not have guys that can consistently win outside and or deep in this offense. Now, I do think seeing more of Curtis Samuel and seeing more of Elijah Moore from a snap share perspective, from a routes run perspective, can mitigate some of the stresses on this offense as a whole. Both of those guys have the opportunity to stretch the defense a little bit. And I'm going to say this line because I've said it so much. I know Curtis Samuel's timed 40 speed is. I don't think he plays as fast as that time speed indicates. I don't think he's like a 97 Madden speed like his 40 time would indicate, but he does have some gravity. He can pull defenders. He can stretch the field a little bit. Elijah Moore can do similar things, and I think he's a better route runner than Curtis Samuel. I think he's one of the better route runners in the wide receiver room. I think Palmer is the best route runner in the wide receiver room, and I think it's between Moore and Shakir for number 2, although they're different type of route runners and different type of players. Either way, I think you need to see more Elijah Moore and more Curtis Samuel, less from a gadget standpoint, even if it's, just to pull the defense and clear out, if it's just to occupy some guys and create space between the second and third level, or actually give them some shots downfield on some deep posts, some deep comebacks, some deep outs. You need to see more of them. I got some numbers for what we've seen thus far from the wide receiver room. When you're looking at the Buffalo Bills wide receivers from a snaps per game perspective, again, this is snaps per game. This takes into account games that these players played in. This isn't like total games the team has played. So if you're looking at Josh Palmer, it's factoring in the 6 games he played in, not, the 9 games that the Bills have played in. So this is snaps per game for the Buffalo Bills wide receivers. In first is Keon Coleman at 48. Second is Khalil Shakir at 42.7. Third is Tyrell Shavers at 36. Fourth is Curtis Samuel at 29.6. Fifth is Josh Palmer at 29.5. And last is Elijah Moore at 20.1. Now, if you want to look at a routes run standpoint, from a per game standpoint, even from a volume standpoint, I'm going to give you both. So the first number is going to be total routes run in volume. The next number, the fraction one or the decimal one, is going to be the per game routes run. Khalil Shakir, 253 routes, 28.1 per game. Keon Coleman, 245 routes, 27.2 per game. Josh Palmer, 116 routes run, 19.3 per game. Tyrell Shavers, 92 routes run, 10.2 per game. Elijah Moore, 87 routes run, 10.9 per game. Curtis Samuel, 69 routes run, nice, 13.8 per game. Now, before anybody says anything, Josh Palmer getting hurt in that Atlanta game, that affecting it in his numbers. It does. He had 6 offensive plays that game. I forget how many routes run he had in that standpoint. But essentially, it doesn't change much. If you eliminate those snaps from that game and those routes run and that game completely, it doesn't change too much. He's still behind Shaver and Keon in terms of snaps per game. So he's still behind both of them, although he would jump Curtis Samuel by a little bit. So he'd be 4th in terms of snaps per game. And then he'd still be behind Keon and Shakir in routes run per game, but he would still be in 3rd. They need more juice and capability at wide receiver. 2 of the top 3 snap getters for their wide receiver room, and I say this with no disrespect because, they're still NFL players. 2 of their top 3 snaps per game guys at wide receiver, and I understand Palmer's been banged up. I understand Curtis Samuel was banged up and may still be banged up, whatever. 2 of your top 3 snap getters are Keon Coleman and Tyrell Shavers. Neither of them offer you what you need from a pass catching standpoint. Now, I am a run first guy. I am an establish the run type of dude. I believe in that thoroughly. That doesn't mean I believe you shouldn't pass the ball, and I recognize the metrics. Don't let anybody yell at me for any of that kind of stuff. But despite me being that guy and recognizing Keon Coleman and Tyrell Shavers are both bigger body types. They're both good run blockers. They can dig out safeties. They can mash corners and nickels, and they can even crack on some edges and do some stuff against some backers at times, right? Or some big nickels or some safeties. Despite their affinity for that area of the game, and I know the Bills want bigger bodies at wide receiver for run blocking and for marrying the run and the pass. I think Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore can do a fine enough job as run blockers, plus be much more viable as pass catchers. So I don't think they're going to be, up here in terms of run blocking. I don't think they're going to be, an 8 out of 10 as run blockers, but I think they can be a 6 or a 6.5. And then that's only like a 2 to 1.5 difference potentially. And then as pass catchers, I think I think Coleman right now is like a 3 or a 4 at best. I think Shavers is probably a 3 or a 4 at best. I think Samuel, and that's at best. You could make a case there are 2, 2.5, or maybe 2.5 to a 3. I think Moore and Samuel can give you a 6, 6.5, 7 there. So I think it averages out from their run blocking differential to their pass catching threat and differential. They need more juice and capability at wide receiver. I know everyone's down in this wide receiver room. And I don't think, Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel right now are these two huge difference makers. But I think both of them are viable NFL wide receivers, and you need to try and do something different at that wide receiver position. You need more juice, more capability, more viability at wide receiver. You need guys who can win one-on-one on the outside and or win deep. And yes, Josh Palmer coming back should, in theory, significantly help this. But your top 3 snap getters, you got to change that a little bit. It can't, 2 of the 3 can't be Coleman and Shavers. And again, I know there's been some injuries to guys and so on and so forth, but Samuel and Moore, I don't think should just be gadget guys. Elijah Moore should not just be the jet sweep guy. I think he's got much more capability to his game than that. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying Moore and Samuel are these all pros that are sitting on the bench or these Pro Bowl players that are sitting on the bench and they're these huge different makers and I can't believe the Bills are sitting them. I don't think they are those guys, but I do think they add more juice, capability, and viability from a pass catching standpoint, from a route running standpoint, from a stretch the field, play supporting roles and do things to help clear out space for other guys. I think they do that more than Keon Coleman and Tyrell Shavers. And the Bills need that because if they continue to struggle to win outside and or deep, everything is going to continue to get constricted. Defenses are going to focus on the run and sell out against the run. Defenses are not going to be afraid to leave their corners on islands no matter how good or bad they are. It's just going to keep getting tighter and tighter. Defenses are going to sit and hit their drop, but no, Allen's probably going to check it down. We have to get to like 10 to 12 yards depth, but we know Allen's probably going to throw it at 4 yards or 5 yards if we can come up and rally. You have to start to create separation between the first level and the second level. And then between the second and third level, you need to push the ball downfield at some point. The threat has to be there. Ideally, you have to find some success there. Just chucking it downfield for the sake of chucking it downfield, as somebody mentioned earlier, those are lower percentage throws. So it comes with an inherent risk. You can't just start chucking it downfield and think that's going to work, especially with Allen, who has struggled to throw the ball downfield a little bit for the past several years. But that element has to be present. There has to be some kind of threat to start to loosen up defenses. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Charles, it seems like there's an umbrella capped on this defense or on the Bills offense at like 20 yards or 25 yards. I think it's even like lower. I think it really is like 15 to 20, just keeps everything there. And then with Samuel and Palmer and Moore, you have 3 better route runners than Keon Coleman and Tyrell Shavers. I know what Shavers and Coleman bring as blockers, and I do think that's valuable, but they're just not giving you what you need as pass catchers right now. And that is hindering the entire offense as a whole, because despite the fact that Shavers and Coleman are good run blockers, everybody's keen on the run game so much and the type of run game that you have, which I'm also going to talk about in a minute, that there's really no net positive there for them being in the game as run blockers. You're just not getting it done. And again, I think they need to upgrade this wide receiver room in the offseason. I think they need a dude and or multiple B+ kind of guys, whether that comes at free agency or the draft. I don't care. They just need to alter this room a little bit. But where they're sitting right now, Keon Coleman cannot be your highest snap getter at wide receiver. He can't be your second leader in terms of routes run in volume and per game. You can't have that. You got to change that up at this point. And again, I think that'll start to loosen some things up in the defense a little bit. And part of the reason you need to get more snaps from Moore and Samuel, it's not just like, because someone out there might be like, oh, you know what? Why can't you just keep having Shavers and Coleman be those dudes, keep running the ball, and then you put Moore and Samuel in there to pass the ball? It starts to get tendency. You start to have tendencies and tells and things kind of being given away. That's why I mentioned in the offseason, it was important to get, speed and verticality in the top of the depth chart for the Bills wide receivers. So that way, when you have somebody in there, they're in there a lot. And they could be run blocking. They could be going deep. They could be running a screen. They could be doing something underneath and intermediate. Having a more complete wide receiver at the top of your depth chart and or somebody with speed, it reduces the tendency and the tell for when they are in the game. It kind of goes, the example, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, didn't do much with the Bills last year, went to the Saints, caught a bunch of deep balls. He was a tell and a tendency when he came in, because almost every time he came in for the Bills, I was like, oh, well, that dude's probably going deep. And then so the teams knew he was going deep. And it might stretch things a little bit, but there is predictability within that. There is tendency, there is tell, all of that kind of stuff. So give me more Curtis Samuel, give me more Elijah Moore out wide on the field. I don't care. I think they have the ability to stretch the defense a little bit and help loosen up defenses against this offense and give you some productivity. And again, whatever's going on with Samuel, maybe he is still banged up. I don't know. It's crazy to me that they brought him in knowing his year with Brady in Carolina and how good they were. And every time he's in there, he's not even, he has the lowest amount of routes run at 69 this year. And he's got 13.8 routes run per game. That's only 3.6 more per game than Tyrell Shavers. That should not be happening in any circumstance. Like, that should not be happening. No disrespect to Tyrell Shavers. He's just not there as a pass catcher and as a route runner. Although he did have a really nice route in the low red zone against Miami on the interception that Allen threw on that stick concept. But conversation for another time. So yeah, this wide receiver room is really frustrating. Claude says, what if Keon was put in the slot? Would that help him? The problem with putting Keon in the slot is when you are in the slot, a lot more is asked of you mentally because the game is coming at you faster and from a more complex standpoint. You have to read coverages and leverage faster, quicker, and accurately when you are in the slot. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm saying that's just hard. Like, that's part of what made Cole Beasley so great. The way he saw the game was so high level. That's part of what makes Shakir good. That's why he's so good on those option routes and those leverage routes, which they need to get more of in the offense. They had too many under Dorsey. My biggest problems with Dorsey were twofold. One, he didn't run the ball enough and commit to the run game when it was good, because it was already good in 2023. He just didn't commit to it enough. That was one big problem. Two, a lot of the passing concepts were option-based, and they didn't have the dudes to run that offense. He wanted to run that offense like they still had Diggs and Bees and Brown, and they didn't have that. That's tough to constantly ask dudes, okay, on this play, you're going to read the coverage, and based on what happens, we'll tell you what route to run. Because you need your receivers to all see the same thing at the same time, and the quarterback to see the same thing at the same time as your receivers. So Brady came in and ran more full field concepts, progression concepts, mirrored concepts on both sides. You had that kind of baked in more. You need more option stuff now. You need more leverage read stuff. And Shakir, again, excels at that kind of stuff. Reading coverage, reading the leverage, and knowing like, okay, oh, he's doing A, that means I do B. Up, he did B, that means I do C. Like, he's good at that. Keon, again, we haven't seen it, so I don't know. I know the whole power slot thing. I do think it could help him a little bit, but if he's in the slot, that means Shakir probably isn't, or Kincaid probably isn't. And I think both of those dudes are better in the slot than Keon. And the game comes at you a lot faster and harder mentally when you are in the slot. And that's a tough piece. Bills Are Electric says, in my opinion, we have to trade for a viable wide receiver in the offseason. Drafting a guy late in the first round is a roll of the dice. I think that's fair, but I would really like Carnell Tate from Ohio State. Oh, that rhymes. I don't think they're going to get Tyson from ASU. Tate is an option potentially, or maybe Denzel Boston. I haven't even gotten into college football tape. I can't speak on it at this point, but I do think there are some options at the end of the first round. But I do like your idea of just getting yourself a known quantity, a viable wide receiver. Kind of like what they did with Stephon Diggs a couple years ago. Go out and get yourself somebody who's already proven and already a known quantity instead of getting somebody up to speed and or developing them and or having a dart throw that the draft is. Oh, Bills are electric. Saying Palmer wide, Samuel wide. I don't care where you put Keon. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I think you need more Elijah Moore and you need more Curtis Samuel. And I still don't think that's amazing. Like, I don't love the idea of being like, hey, you know what'll save the Bills passing game? Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer. But what they're doing right now, it's not working. And it's starting to hinder the run game, which was one of my biggest fears coming into the offseason, that their passing game and their receivers would not be viable enough to make defenses honest and prevent them from just stacking against the run and playing run first and committing against the run. And also, while we're kind of on that subject, a couple weeks from now, that Thursday night game against Houston, oof, they're going to sit in single high and they're going to say, we dare you to beat Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter. We dare you to do that. And they're going to try and hurt the Bills on first and second down and get them into third and long or third and known passing situation. And they're going to let Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson hunt. That game is scary. I am so fearful. And again, they're an extreme example because Stingley is one of the best corners in the league, would probably be an easy CB1 in the entire NFL if not for Pat Surtain. And Kamari Lassiter is sick on the other side too. And then they can play single high with Bullock, who's so good as a rangy free safety. Can't still really tackle, but you let him be free safety. Whoo! It's going to be interesting. That game against Houston is a scary one coming down the pipe. That's one I think is going to be a really good test, whether Palmer's back or not. But if you start to incorporate more and Samuel, I want to see them go up against Houston. What can they do against Stingley and Lassiter? One of the better corner tandems they're going to face the entirety of this year, and especially down the stretch. That's a good test for what they can do at the receiver position and what they can do from a run pass standpoint against a good defense who's trying to make them one-dimensional and can get after them in both ways. But yeah, more Elijah Moore, more Curtis Samuel. Again, that's an improvement. That's a hope. I don't think it all of a sudden propels this team forward, but you just can't keep living with Keon Coleman as your second highest routes run in volume and routes run per game and have him living as your highest snap getter at wide receiver per game and Tyrell Shavers being third. You need more. You need more, no pun intended, from your receivers from a juice and capability and viability standpoint as pass catchers. And I think Moore and Samuel are your best hope at that. Next piece is a little bit of a low-hanging fruit and kind of general, but I think it's important to note because they've been playing good. So another improvement and or hope for 2025 down the stretch. Cole Bishop getting better and Max Hairston getting better. If they both continue to improve, the more time on task they get while continuing to make splash plays and maybe even more splash plays as they get more time on task and build more confidence, it's pretty self-explanatory for what that does for the defense, especially for this year and beyond. I know Hairston had an up and down performance against Miami. Waddle got him a couple times because Waddle is sick. But Hairston also got him a couple times, and he was right there stride for stride on Bishop's interception. He was right there stride for stride and got his own interception later in the game. Hairston's play has been really encouraging. And again, there are some ups and downs. Why? Because he's a rookie who just played in his third NFL game. And the first two games he was platooning. So this was his real first game as a full starter. He saw some snaps, the live bullets the first 2 weeks, didn't get a training camp, didn't get a preseason. He's still learning as he goes. I think you're pretty happy with the return on investment right now, given how he's played. Now, in theory, the more time on task he gets, the more he plays, he should get better. Hopefully you continue to see the splash plays and not, not even high variance, but the splash plays. And then the floor goes up and he starts to reduce the amount of time that he gets burned, letting guys into his blind spot, getting turned around a little bit. Yes, he has the speed that can recover. He even recovered well on the touchdown to Waddle. The issue was he just kind of panicked, flailed a little bit. Granted, Tua hung that ball up in the air, but he recovered. All he had to do was get his head around. He could have made a play on that ball, but he just kind of panicked. That should, in theory, get him more time on task, get more comfortable, less panic. He got beat. His recovery speed got him back in line with Waddle. Again, Tua underthrew that ball a little bit, but he's got the speed that will keep him close to anyone and everyone, even if he does get beat. But if you can reduce the amount of beatings that happen for him mentally or physically, Ooh, that's really encouraging. Bishop continues to play well. Jordan Hancock, I'd like him to get some more reps. He's, I think he's progressing fine, not some standout, but I think he's a, potential good investment for 2026 and beyond, because I don't think Rapp is your starting safety next year, and it's definitely not Jordan Poyer. So you might either have to go into the draft, or if you think you have Jordan Hancock, that's cool. Then you don't have to dip into the draft or the free agent pool. We'll see what happens there. But Cole Bishop has been improving week to week. I still think he's best in and around the box and the closer to the line of scrimmage that he gets, but you're starting to see him make some plays from depth, coming forward and going back. I still do think he's, got to work on some of his angles coming forward and what he's seeing and processing, but he's starting to trust his eyes a little bit more. He's starting to trust his processing a little bit more. He's processing well, quickly, accurately, making some reads. He's starting to jump some routes. He's starting to let his athleticism tie into how he plays because of what he's doing mentally. So really encouraging stuff from Cole Bishop and Max Hairston. And if they continue to stay on this upward trajectory, I think they do a lot for the ceiling of the Bills defense in 2025, but then even more so going forward in 2026 and beyond. Really, really excited for that. They continue to flash, and they just need to continue to stay on that trajectory, especially Bishop, who, for whatever reason, since it's been him and Poyer in the lineup, he's had a jump in his game. He's making plays athletically and mentally. It's nice to see. Dylan says, do you think the Bills actually make the changes, or do you think they're just going to keep the same rotation? I think you put this in when I was still talking about the wide receivers. I truthfully don't know. I don't know how you don't try something different. The whole definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I do think Brady can keep the same rotation, and by mitigating some of the predictability and getting a bit better with concept and design and sequencing, the offense can take a jump. But I don't see how you don't just try and mix up the receiver room, considering the returns you're getting right now through the air from Keon and co. I don't see how you don't try something different. Whether or not they will, I don't know. I mean, I'm also the same guy that said, hey, they keep getting gashed in the run and they need run stuffers on the interior. And they said, you thought, let's get more 3-techs and go for penetration. And they keep getting bounced out the club week in and week out and getting gashed. And they continue to do that year after year. They have their archetypes. They have what they like. When I think they need to zig and the world thinks they need to zig, they just stand pat and they zag. So I truly don't know if they actually make the changes. I think they need to. I don't know if they think they need to. It's a great question. And I'm frustrated just thinking about it. Bills Are Electric said, when do we swap out Bernard for Shaq Thompson? I mentioned this a little earlier. I think as soon as Shaq Thompson is healthy, you put him in there because he's been your best linebacker, and you let Bernard rest because he's hurt. You just let him bang. You just let him bang up. You let him sit on the sideline and get healthy. I don't think you're gonna have to IR him, but you let him rest. One, I think Shaq has been your best linebacker and is playing better than Bernard right now. Two, Bernard is clearly hurt. Let him get healthy. Maybe once he's healthy, he'll go back to being one of your better players on defense. But I think as soon as Thompson is healthy, you get him in there. Seth Bernard says, has Cole Bishop been used differently with Poyer? It seems like Bishop has been a more traditional strong safety or even dime back a lot of plays the last 3 weeks. Yes, some of his really cool plays, especially that Kansas City game, were him playing in and around the box, matching up against tight ends, playing as that buzz safety and the hook curls and the curl flats. I think a lot of it is more tied to having the presence of Cam Lewis, a degree, who can play safety. But I would say it's more with Jordan Hancock, because having Hancock gives you another guy deep from a range and athleticism perspective that makes you feel comfortable keeping Bishop more in and around the box. Plus, he's much better in and around the box with his size and athleticism than Hancock is. So I think when Poyer's on the field, despite the fact that he's not the player physically that he was, he's still a high level player from an IQ standpoint in terms of getting the defense set, making the calls. I think he's helped give Bishop confidence in what he's doing as a player from a mental standpoint, allowing him to play fast and play free and play with his athleticism because he's freed up mentally. I think Poyer has helped a bit with that. Not necessarily used differently. I think you're still seeing Bishop deep. You're still seeing him in the box. You're still seeing single high stuff, split field stuff. But I do think Poyer has had a calming presence on the back end for the secondary and for the defense as a whole. And then I think when Hancock's in the game, they feel more comfortable having a rangy guy back there and allowing Bishop to come and just kind of be that big nickel monster man, buzz safety robber coming forward like he was at Utah. Marty says, do they still need a ball hawk to balance with Bishop, or is Hancock sufficient? In an ideal world, I'd like a true known quantity, range, ball hawk, free safety. I think Hancock could get there. The tough thing with Hancock is, if you followed him at Ohio State and watched Ohio State last year, so you had him, you had Caleb Downs, who I love, and you had Lathan Ransom. I forget what his first name is, but you had Ransom, the third safety. They essentially ran three safety nonstop at Ohio State. Sometimes Hancock was a nickel. Sometimes he was a deep safety. They would weaponize Caleb Downs. They do some really cool non-traditional Tampa 2 shifts and spins where a lot of times Downs was the Tampa player, kind of playing top down, which was really cool. But you get Hancock as like a nickel and a safety. So he hasn't played a ton of like traditional safety, like Bill system kind of safety. I still do think he's developing and needs time on task. I think he's got some range. I think he's got some tackling ability. I would prefer a known quantity at the safety position, but I think he could develop into the free safety-esque, rangy type of safety, deep safety that they need to really free up Bishop. And that's what I really want. Because again, I think Bishop is progressing, playing further from the line of scrimmage, but with how good he is in and around the box, give me a safety with the eyes and the processing and the range to live as a single high safety and let Bishop just do work as a box safety as much as you want, which will also help against the run because you have more numbers in the box. And then if you've got Benford getting back to what he can be and Hairston being what he can be, you can live on islands in either cover 1 or cover 3, have that sweet ball hawk rangy safety in the post, and then have Cole Bishop doing matchup stuff against tight ends, running backs, blitzing, zone, man, whatever the hell you want, while knowing Bishop can still drop deep as a single high post safety or can drop deep into some split high looks. So I do think they need a ball hawk to balance with Bishop. I do think they need that. I think there's a chance Hancock can become that guy. I'm just not fully there yet. We need to see more of him doing that. And if they could get a known quantity to pair with him, I would take him. What else do we got? Rock and Roll Blue says the lack of energy on offense reminds me of the Dorsey era. Yeah, it's funny how a lot of the sluggishness and the stuck in neutral stuff that they're going through now with Brady is reminiscent of the time under Dorsey. Craig says, just joined. So sorry if already discussed, but why not get Cook way more involved and Ty Johnson more involved in the pass game? Also, maybe more rollouts and moving pockets. Those are great questions. I don't know. I've said similar things for several weeks and they're not happening. I do think what's interesting in the pass game, a lot of the ways they got their running backs involved were on those rail routes, specifically off mesh. So mesh, if you don't know, you get like essentially those two drags, one shallow, one a little still underneath, but above the shallow. Then you get that over the ball sit route. That's essentially mesh and how the Bills run it most of the time. But they pair that with the running back out of the backfield being the first read in mesh rail, and he'd run that wheel route or that rail route up the sideline. They feasted on that with Cook, Ray Davis. They did it under Dorsey a bit. They did it under Brady a ton. Like that was his main go-to. Defenses have caught on to that this year. So they're taking away that rail a lot. The Bills hit it once against Miami. I think it was the second play of the game. They hit it when it was that 2nd and 10, and they got 8 yards on it. Second play of the game. The defender didn't get over the top in time. Allen saw Cook, pinned it on him right away, and Cook got like 8 yards. But a lot of times defenses are undercutting it and getting into it or getting over the top of it and deterring the throw. And aside from that, Brady hasn't done a ton to get the running backs involved. It's like that's his only way to get the running backs the ball. But I do think they need to get the running backs more involved. I do think they need to get Ty Johnson more involved in the pass game. And they need more rollouts. They need more moving pockets. I also think you tie that into more play action, which they also need. I don't know why Brady isn't pressing those buttons, especially with some of the protection setting issues they've had and known passing situations kind of getting them into problems. But Brady loves traditional 5-man protections and having Allen and McGovern essentially sorted out. But I think those are all great questions. I do think they need to do all those things. They are just not, and it's really frustrating. Oh, this is a cool question. I don't know the answer. Whose are the worst and best matchups in the playoffs as a wild card team? For the Bills, honestly, I know the struggles they've had. Just don't face Kansas City or Baltimore. And I don't care. Don't face Kansas City and Baltimore. That's all that I want. Indianapolis with their running game is a problem for the Bills defense. And their defense now with Sauce, if they get healthy with Buckner, Lou Anarumo is a big game, coach. I think aside from not wanting to face Kansas City and Baltimore, I would rather not face the Colts because of Anarumo on defense, some of the studs they have on defense, and that running game on offense. So I would like to avoid the Colts. Broncos have a great defense, but I'm not really too fearful of the offense. No jinx. Chargers, meh. Steelers, meh. If they even get there. Who else? Yeah, it would mainly be I don't want to play Baltimore. I don't want to play Kansas City. And then I don't want the Colts. But I wouldn't mind the Colts. But yeah. I would say it's Jason says any good running team. James says Ant loves the Buckeyes. I hate Ohio State. Hate them. I don't know if I've ever said that. For those who don't know, I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan. And I will forever hate Ohio State for the 2002 national championship that Miami was robbed of. It should have been back-to-back. It should have been done and dusted. They got screwed on that pass interference call in the end zone. Should have been back-to-back national titles for the Miami Hurricanes. But, so Maurice Claret and Craig Krenzel and that stupid Ohio State team, yeah, I will forever hate Ohio State. Although I love Caleb Downs and they do have some sweet dudes, I hate Ohio State. Pop says if you don't know Mesh, you don't watch the film. That's right. Adrian. Oh, well, let me get to this one first. Zenter says, how come we don't have running back screen or we don't see it that often? Josh Allen isn't good at running back screens. He's not good at the tempo and the timing of it, and he's not good at throwing the ball in the trajectory and the manner in which you need to throw it to make a screen successful. Also, because he's a mobile threat, you don't get a lot of teams that just sell out and go, hey, one gap penetrate, let's attack the quarterback, and then, the ball's over our head, and, we're screwed now. A lot of times it's eyes on Allen and guys focusing on rush lane integrity. When you have that, you're kind of already playing somewhat safer and more under control. So screens don't work necessarily against defenses like that. But I do think the biggest thing, because it's been under Dable, it's been under Dorsey, it's been under Brady. They don't have a great running back screen game because Allen isn't good at the timing and the tempo of it and the body language and the throw trajectory needed. Yeah. Adrian says, is the problem that Josh Allen is not taking the underneath stuff or nobody is truly getting open? Unfortunately, it's both. I do think there's stuff available underneath that Allen is bypassing. There are times when it's 2nd and 10 and he's got a 5-yard completion right there. Or it's 3rd and 10 and he's got a 6 or 7-yard completion and maybe you can go for it on 4th down. Little things like that. I also think from a deep ball or an intermediate standpoint, there have been some options that have been open in the intermediate, the high intermediate, or even deep areas. And he hasn't taken those. He's, taken the checkdowns or kind of the underneath stuff. So I think overall it's just a decision-making overall. But I do think, in this past game against Miami, there was some opportunity for more stuff that was open and Allen just didn't hit it and he bypassed it, or his eyes were in the wrong place, or, he got confused by the coverage and wasn't able to hit it. But separation is an issue. They don't have a bunch of guys that are just beating dudes left and right. And again, I think a lot of it is tied to what I said. Keon Coleman isn't routing dudes up and separating. Tyrell Shavers isn't routing dudes up and separating. Dawson Knox isn't routing dudes up and separating. Palmer's your best separator, and he's been hurt. Khalil Shakir, they only want to use him around the line of scrimmage. Kincaid's a mismatch creator, and then he got banged up. But there's only so much you can do with him because he's a tell or a tendency giveaway because of what he is or isn't as a run blocker or an inline tight end player. So there's all these kind of mitigating factors with things, which is why I want to see more and more Curtis Samuel. Because I think Elijah Moore and Curtis Samuel can separate a bit more, give you more juice, and give you more spacing capability because of their athleticism and route running and speed. So yeah, you're going to get this answer from me from a lot if you haven't already watched the show before. Very rarely for me, and this isn't a me thing, this is what I believe football is, very rarely is a problem tied to any just one thing. Very rarely is it A or B or C. Usually it's a mix of both to some degree and some level. Everything is so interconnected and woven together that it's hard to just parse out one specific thing as being the holistic problem. So I do think recently Allen has not taken the free profit enough, but I also do think there are separation issues and guys not coming open. And I think this is a bit of a chicken egg scenario, and I hope I'm not galaxy braining this too much. I think the separation issues and guys not coming open is part of what is in Allen's head and part of the reason he's playing skittish, because he doesn't trust that guys are going to be where he needs them to be. He doesn't trust that guys are going to get open. So he evades earlier than he has to, or he looks away from somebody because he doesn't trust that somebody's going to come open or be in the spot they're going to need to be. So I think then you kind of get into this, that's what I'm saying, chicken and egg scenario, where it's like, okay, is he not taking the stuff, or is nobody getting open? Is the problem, nobody's getting the ball because Allen's not getting it to him, or because they're not getting open? And you kind of just go like round and round. But right now it's a bit of both, especially if you're coming off that Miami game. It's a bit of both. And I do think also within that is Joe Brady's predictability and lack of creativity and sequencing and layering. But conversation for another time. Arvell Reese plus Sonny Styles. I wish the Bills could get Reese. There's no chance in hell they get Reese. There's a chance they could get Styles and might need to, if because Milano's probably gone. But I don't think you could spend a first or second round pick on a linebacker if you're this Bills team. But man, Reese would be so nasty. As a Miami guy, give me Ruben Bain all day. I would trade. I know nobody wants defense in the first round, and I know they need receivers. Oh, give me Ruben Bain all day, man. Just plays the run, compressor, but athletic with some dip and some bend. Oh, dude is a monster, and it has been since he was a freshman. All right. This comment here will tie into my next point here. Hot Wheels Corvette says, are we looking at a watered down version of a Joe Brady offense in order to satisfy a defensive coach philosophy of offense to keep the defense off the field? I understand the thought process for this, given how McDermott is and who McDermott is, but I don't think so. And granted, there's a chance, right? It's hard to know for sure. And I think it's a fair question to ask. Given the lack of building or diversity in this offense versus last year, is kind of concerning, to the point that if you wanted to play devil's advocate, you could be like, well, the reason the offense hasn't changed is because the way it was last year is exactly what McDermott wants, and that's what McDermott wants. But hearing some of the things McDermott has said, I don't think, he's essentially like kind of puppet mastering the offense. And then if you even look on the other side, again, you can play devil's advocate in a multitude of ways here. If you're looking at how the Bills defense is built, the Bills defense is built to stop the pass. In previous years, they've invited the run because they recognize that stopping the pass and stopping explosives is the number one thing. Their interior is built to rush the quarterback and get penetration. Their interior is not built to stop the run. I know they recognize the importance of it, and this has been the philosophical annoyance of mine. Their defense on the interior is not built to stop the run in any way, shape, or form. They are literally built to rush the QB and stop the pass first and foremost, and whatever happens against the run is whatever happens against the run. So it's funny that they would build the defense that way, but then have an offense that isn't built to pass the football at all, or doesn't want to pass the football at all. I do think running the football is very important in today's NFL because of the pendulum swing that has gone on and the, time is a flat circle nature of offenses versus defenses. I think you need to run the football in today's NFL. I think you need condensed formations and bigger body types at wide receiver and heavy personnel, and you need to create advantages with formation and alignment. A lot of what the Bills do, a lot of what the Rams do, what the Lions do, what the Packers do. I know the Packers had a bad performance last night, but they're still a good offense, and LaFleur is still a good mind. What Shanahan has done in San Francisco, like a lot of what these top offensive minds, Ben Johnson, so on and so forth, all this kind of stuff, right? The Bills turn their offense into that mold. The Bills offense is very much in vogue with what is successful in today's NFL. The issue is they maybe swung the pendulum too hard to the run, to the degree that they sacrifice too much of the pass game, or the vertical aspect of it at least. But I think this is plausible. I just don't think that's what's happening. It's just hard for me to think that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane believe in building a defense priority to stop the pass. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they're just going to want an offense that doesn't pass at all, or that they don't care about the pass in any way, shape, or form. I don't see those things meshing or marrying, although it is possible, right? And I do think Sean McDermott wants you to run the ball, but I don't think he wants it. His whole thing is balance. between the offense and defense, but even within each unit itself, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So I don't think he's happy with this offense. But that's a fair thought to have. Oh, Owen says, who's your favorite wide receiver coming out this year? Oh, it's so I haven't even started to like rank and fully tape evaluate. If I had to go off broadcast footage, which is kind of a lie, Tyson from Arizona State is probably my one. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I like Jordan Tyson and I like Carnell Tate from Ohio State. Again, that rhymes. They're close for 1 and 2. I don't know. I like them both. Exactly. From RJ here, who says this team doesn't even really have a single one tech. Even Daquan isn't a true one tech. Such a great point. Ed Oliver goes down and they flex Daquan to the 3 tech and he kills at it. Why? Because Daquan is still more of a 3 tech than he is a 1 tech, but he's the starting 1 tech in the Bills defense because everybody's a penetrator and they don't really have true 1 techs. They want penetrators. They want shooters. So everything is based off of upfield penetration, pop, juice, triggering, gap shooting, getting after the quarterback, getting upfield. I just find it hard to believe they build a defense that way and then do the opposite when it comes to offensive philosophy. Joey says 2-dimensional offense is great, except when you get behind by 14 points and the dimension you need is your weakest. Well, but if that dimension is that weak, you're not 2-dimensional. I don't think the Bills' offense right now is 2-dimensional. I think the Bills' offense is 1-dimensional. It's the run game, and if the run game doesn't work, they're screwed. And that was, again, my biggest fear, one of my biggest fears coming into this season. 2-dimensional offense means you're viable in both the run and the pass. I don't think they're viable in the pass right now, so they're not 2-dimensional. The Bills are very much game script dependent, which absolutely sucks. And that's saying something because they were game script dependent last year, and it's even worse this year. But hopefully with the injuries, we'll see, and things will get better. And also, too, you look at how this, one more thing on like the McDermott Brady aspect, with how this Bills defense is built, this Bills defense, again, is built to play coverage and rush the quarterback. They want to get out to a lead. They want points. They need points because this defense is designed to play with a lead. This defense is designed to play against the Chiefs offense and play with a lead. Play against teams that have had to move away from the run because of game script. So McDermott wants explosives. He wants points. If they come through the ground or they come through the air, he doesn't care, but he wants points. He needs points because that scoring on offense helps complement the defense. I don't think it's necessarily run the football to keep the defense off the field. They're running the ball because they have a great offensive line and a really good run game. And that's why they want to run the football. But I think that's another great example as well. Like their defense is much better with a lead and playing in front and playing with a big lead. Like they want to be up by 14 or 17 points. So the offenses have to be like, oh, well, we can't run the ball now. We got to throw. And that fits into what the Bills defense needs because the Bills defense are not a good run defense team. They're not good tackling against the run, and they're much better rushing the QB and playing coverage. And you can do that when you have a lead and you get out in front early and often. Yeah. Okay. This next piece I want to talk about. Less predictability on offense. I've mentioned it several times throughout this episode. This one is really tied to Joe Brady. I'm going to talk about some of the schematic pieces here for a minute. But one of my favorite plays that's a new play that they've added this year is, if you follow me on social, I tweet about it almost every week whenever they run it. Blast counter YF. For those who don't know, essentially this is what it is. They usually do it it doesn't have to be from an offset I or a strong I formation, but this is usually how they run it. So Allen is under center. James Cook is in the dot. You have Reggie Gilliam offset either to the left or the right. So offset I, strong I. That's where Reggie Gilliam comes in. And then also to Gilliam's side is Jackson Hawes. If you're starting to picture this, as I describe it more, you'll see it, right? So strong I formation, Gilliam in the offset or the strong spot, Jackson Hawes as the tight end. But Jackson Hawes is off the line of scrimmage. Right before the snap, Jackson Hawes will go in motion right behind Allen. That's the blast motion aspect. He will go there. He will kick out the defensive end. Reggie Gilliam will take a step forward, cross over and follow Hawes. He will lead James Cook through the hole. James Cook, if the run is going left, he'll step right and then go left. If the run is going right, he'll step left and go right. That's where the part of the counter action comes in. So try to picture that together. If you search my Twitter handle or on Blue Sky, you'll see it a ton. Pro, ant, blast counter, pro, ant, blast, whatever. They run that play a ton, and it works for them, and it's good. The issue is they've run it so much from the same presentation, defenses have largely keyed in on it. Now, James Cook is good enough, and this offensive line is good enough that even when teams close down on the gap where it's supposed to go, Cook can find success somewhere else. But I think that play is such a good microcosm of what they are because they've telegraphed it at this point. Because when they send Hawes in that blast motion, heavy majority of the time, you can bet it's going to be that blast counter. And then when you see Gilliam follow him, even more so. That play is such a good microcosm of what they are because that play is just a tell. As soon as you see the blast motion, you can highly bet it's coming. Even before that, just formationally, it's a tell with that offset or strong eye formation and Hawes in line, but off the line of scrimmage. Sometimes Hawes is the only tight end. Sometimes he's hipped off of Dawson Knox and you're in 22 personnel. So it could be 21 personnel. It could be 22, but it's still that strong eye formation or that offset eye. Hawes goes in that blast motion. There goes Gilliam. Boom. They need more variability there overall in the offense, but with that play in particular. And that's why it's such a good microcosm for a lot of the run game. And even some of their passing concepts as well. They run so much double China where you got those two in-breaking routes, like both at like 5 yards. Some people call it a fin concept because of 5 yards and in, but you'll have three receivers to a side and the outside guy or the number one runs 5 yards and in. The inside guy or the number two runs 5 yards and in. And then the number three guy on the inside, he runs that corner route, which is the 7, where you get double China 7, or he'll run vertical, run a post. They run so much double China stuff, again, either with the 7 or a post or a vertical. They run so much mesh. They run so much curl flats, and they get to it sometimes differently, like who's going to be the 7 route in double China 7, or who's the curl, who's the flat, from personnel, and sometimes with short motion. But it's a lot of just the same concepts. And teams do this in general, right? Everybody pretty much runs the same stuff, and everybody has their hits that they like to get to and play. But you got to dress up the presentation. And situationally, they've gotten predictable. With their presentation, they've gotten predictable. There's been too much from a tell standpoint. Again, the run examples are great. Like, they become so predictable with some of their run stuff, like where you see a formation. I can see a formation and I can call out the run, and I would say like 80% of the time I'm right in what run is coming. And when it's working, it's hilarious, right? Because it's like, oh my God, they keep running this same run from the same look and the defense can't stop it. Ha, 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 ha. That's not happening anymore. More often than not, the defense is snuffing it out. They're moving accordingly, and they're going right to where that run is supposed to go. And the Bills are kind of getting screwed off because of it. Even some of the mid-zone stuff against the Dolphins this past weekend. You had two with Benito Jones, number 95, where he's playing on the in-season play. It's mid-zone week. So let's say in this instance, they're running to the left. Benito Jones is in a 1-tech or a 2-eye. He feels that center go away from him to lead the zone. As soon as that happens, he shoots immediately. He sees the center is away, so he squeezes his A-gap into the other A-gap. Jordan Brooks fits off of him and shuts Cook down at the line of scrimmage or behind it. Because they're like, oh, here comes, we think we already know what's coming. Here's that first indicator. Yep, that's exactly what it is. Let's shut it down. They've gotten predictable with a lot of their run concepts in terms of the concepts they're running, 1, but 2, from the presentation that they are running them from. When I say presentation, I mean the formation, the personnel, the alignment. You can look at it and say, it's not even just like, oh, I think this is coming. It's like, yeah, this is probably coming. There's a difference between someone like having like, 40 or 50% odds that this is what's happened. And that's still high, but you're like, I think it's more like you can know 70 to 80% of the time what run concepts are coming. And the Bills' O-line and run game is so good that they're still able to get out of that sometimes, even with that predictability. But against better teams and against teams that have played them before and have them scouted well, it's starting to become a death sentence. And then that run game starts to get slow. That doesn't work. what we talked about earlier. They don't have the guys on the outside that strike fear from, winning on the outside and or vertical or deep. So that everything gets constricted, it gets tight, so on and so forth. And we have all these problems. So they need less predictability on offense. And again, that blast counter YF is, and YF, for those who don't know, it's YF because the Y is the first man and the F or Reggie Gilliam is the second. So the Y refers to Hawes and the F refers to Gilliam. That is just such a great example. They've gotten predictable with that concept, and they've gotten predictable a lot with their offense. Even from the run standpoint of, predictability of it always being on James Cook. I tweeted out earlier. Actually, let me go grab that tweet right now because I didn't put it in my notes. Run the ball with Ray Davis. Run the ball with Ty Johnson. James Cook, amongst 68 qualifying running backs with at least 100 snaps, he's fifth in touches with 190, and he's third in touch rate at 53.2%. Touch rate is carries plus catches divided by snaps. Now, I get it because he's become a really good running back, and I still think he's getting even better, and he's your clear number one. I get it, but you can still run duo with Ray Davis and have him be a hammer and get downfield. You could still run a bunch of stuff with Ty Johnson or do some play action stuff with Ty Johnson or let him get out into a route, run some angle routes or some option routes, do some stuff out of the backfield. They can use the running backs in some varied ways and not just, okay, we're going to run the ball with Cook and then take Cook out and pass it. Like even that is starting to get a little bit predictable. They're getting predictable with concepts. They're getting predictable with even personnel, but more so formation and alignment. And you're seeing it a lot in the run and some in the pass as well. Also, tying into that, someone mentioned it earlier, the under center versus shotgun stuff. They have a 20.8 pass rate when under center. That is 29th in the league. So that means 21% of the time when they're under center, they're passing the ball, which means 79% of the time they're running the ball when they're under center. That's a huge ratio. So 8 out of 10 times when they're under center, they're going to run the ball. And then, so think about this, right? Let's kind of play it like that, right? Roughly 80% of the time when the Bills are under center, they are running the football. So you already start with that. Oh, they're under center? All right, cool. Odds are they're running the ball. So you can key in on the run. Then you look at the personnel and the alignment and the formation. And because they're starting to telegraph their run concepts based off of alignment and or formation and or personnel and all of that tying into, presentation, the motions, the shifts, the alignments, all of it, you can start to whittle that down further. So you see, they're under center. It's probably going to be a run. They're in that offset or strong eye. Where's Jackson Hawes? There he is. Ooh, he's offline a little bit. That blast counter is probably coming. You can do that for all their run concepts because of how they present them. And again, when I say present them, I mean personnel, formation, alignment. You look at shotgun. When they're in shotgun, they have an 80.5% pass rate, which is 6th highest. So it's pretty easy to tell. When they're in shotgun, they're going to throw the ball. When they're under center, they're probably going to run it. Then they have a 19.4 play action rate, which is 27th. It was criminal last year when they didn't have a higher play action rate. It's still criminal this year, which starts to make me think, I know some people mentioned it last year. Maybe Josh Allen doesn't like turning his back to the defense. Maybe he doesn't like play action. I don't know, but it's driving me insane that they have this really good running game and they don't spam play action. They don't run bootlegs. They don't move the pocket, especially if they've started to incorporate more outside zone this year. And that pairs so well with bootlegs and Josh Allen. Get him on the move. Take advantage of the run game and try and suck some defenders in. They did, and you can dump it off to somebody on a slide route for a quick, easy 6 or 7 yards. Cool. Or you can hit someone on a crosser or in the intermediate. Cool. Or you can maybe take a shot and generate an explosive. Even better. Or guys are dropping with the route distribution. Cool. And Josh Allen can run for a nice 5 or 6 yards. Lean into those things. Also predictability. First down run rate. Or first down runs, I should say. They're running a ton on first down. They're last in pass rate on first down at 37.3. And I don't think that's super criminal because it's like, they have Josh Allen. They should be throwing the ball more. But 63% of the time, essentially, they're running the ball on first down. Those are heavy odds, heavy numbers. And then again, you tie it into like, okay, it's first down. They're probably going to run the ball. They're under center. They're definitely going to run the ball. Here's this alignment. This is what run concept is coming. Boy, like it all starts to compound when it comes to predictability and tendencies and tells. I mentioned them needing more play action. I do think they need that, and they need to marry it with their run concepts. I'm going to use that blast counter YF as another example. Against Miami, they ran a blast counter YF play action that presented just like their actual run. You saw Hawes in line, but off the line of scrimmage. You saw Reggie Gilliam in that strong eye or that offset eye alignment to Hawes' side. Allen taps his foot. Here goes Hawes in blast motion. Here goes Gilliam in that step to lead it through, but it's actually play action. The second level gets sucked up. Dalton Kincaid slips behind the second level, and Allen pins it right on him. They need more play action in general, but they need more of that kind of play action concepts that mirror their run concepts. With how teams are keyed into the Bills' run game and underneath passes, this is a very low entryway or entry point into giving yourself some breathing room and potentially creating easy buttons and explosives. So they need more play action overall, and they need to have that play action marry with their run concepts. They need that same presentation and have it be a play action pass to start to put defenses into hell a little bit. Also, talked about getting more Elijah Moore, talked about getting more Curtis Samuel. If the wide receivers aren't cutting it and the passing stuff isn't cutting it, you need to just lean into your heavies. Lean into 13 personnel once Kincaid is back. Lean into 22 and just mash teams. I know it's not sexy. I know people don't want that because, oh, hey, it's Josh Allen. He's the MVP. We should be chucking it all around the field for, advanced metrics reasons or just in theory or whatever. I get it, and I understand. This team is not built to chuck it around the field. They're not built to chuck it 30 to 40 times a game. They're not built to live in spread and dice teams up through the air. They are built to run the football, so just lean into it. Go heavy, mash the hell out of defenses. Lean into Reggie Gilliam and Jackson Hawes, and then go play action from there. Put more bodies attached to the line of scrimmage because your run game menu increases because of what you have up front. Try and force defenses into base. And if they don't, and they still want to stay in nickel, you're probably going to have the run advantage, and you can mash guys. And if they're going to try and match with heavier bodies and personnel, that's where you lean into the play action. That's where you lean into those concepts. Get more tight end leaks, tight end delays. Take advantage of Dawson Knox's athleticism by getting him matched up against a true linebacker and sending him on a sail route or sending him on a corner route or a drag where he can run away from someone. Get Dalton Kincaid, attached to the formation, but not really, so he could really run a route, or have him kind of be in an exploded tight end alignment on the formation, or be that quasi X and see who gets matched up against them and who you pull from the box. If you're not getting it done with your, that's also kind of where I'm at too. Like, instead of using Keon Coleman and Tyrell Shavers as your blockers and have them be out there because they're good blockers. And I get it. They're out there and they could block, but they're receivers, so they could also catch passes. And that's a bit more of, are we going to run or are we going to pass? I'd rather just put Gilliam and Hawes out there and just mash the hell out of teams and then go play action off of that. And I don't think it's an ideal situation because Hawes isn't some immaculate route runner or some great pass threat, although I do think he is more explosive and bursty than he gets credit for. Gilliam can do some things out in the flat on some pass stuff, but you got to have some kind of variability. Either commit to that. I think, and that for me, that's like the last case scenario, was fully leaning into that heavy stuff. Like the Rams, I know a lot of people are using this example, like the Rams use a ton of 13, which is cool, but they've got 3 tight ends that are capable as blockers and pass catchers with Higbee, Davis Allen, and dude that's a rookie from Oregon, Ferguson. So you've got 3 dudes that can block but also catch some passes. The Seahawks, they go heavy. They use a bunch of 12. They use a bunch of 2 running back looks, or with an actual traditional fullback, and the stuff that they can do. Detroit's been doing it for years, but they've got the body types for it, and better body types in theory than what the Bills have. You just have to limit your predictability. You have to vary things up in a variety of ways. And so again, I mentioned all the things like Moore and Samuel, how that ties into it, but so much of it is just the predictability of where they've gotten to or where they're at as an offense. And I appreciate the kind words that are said about me from you folks in the chat, or the people that say nice things about me on social, or the people who do this, just general people who follow the work, or actual professionals or players that I work with, or analysts who have said kind words. It's super cool to hear when people say oh yeah, ball, or this and that. That's super cool. I should not be able to watch a game and be like, oh, this is the run that's coming. That shouldn't happen, Because if I can do that as a person who does this because he just loves football and works a day job and puts time into this whenever I can, if I can do that, imagine what the professionals who get paid to do this, who know exponentially more than I will ever know, and who live in that space and who prepare and whose lives are built on stopping an offense. Imagine what they can pick up, both in the coaching staff and the players. I'm just some guy. I'm some dude. And if I can watch a game on Sunday and be like, here comes blast counter. Oh, here comes duo. Here comes mid-zone week. If I can do that, bro, imagine what a defensive coordinator can do, or a linebackers coach, or an actual player at whatever spot, like, or all of them. Imagine that. Like, I put a lot of time and effort into studying like this game, not just for the Bills, but football in general, the schematics and the X's and O's of it. So I think I do have a pretty good or advanced knowledge of it. I should not be able to do that. And if I can do that, that means the pros it's even easier for them because they probably don't have to double check themselves. It's crazy how we've got here. Because last year they were layering well and sequencing well. And they were very, again, similar to this year, they were very in vogue with the type of offense that was needed to succeed in today's NFL. And they just didn't really build on it. And now we're just here. And blah. It's tough. But yeah, the big things for improvements or hope for this year for 2025 and tying into Beane a little bit going forward, got to get healthy, right? I know that's low-hanging fruit and not an answer that anybody wants to hear. And again, I don't think getting healthy is going to be a cure-all for this team because even when the guys come back that were their starters on paper coming into the year, they're still going to have certain deficiencies and vulnerabilities. But once they get healthy and they get those guys back, the floor for this team raises, which I think is important. So 1, get healthy. 2, more Curtis Samuel and more Elijah Moore in terms of snaps and routes per game. You cannot continue to live with as much Keon Coleman and Tyrell Shavers as you are getting, especially from a Keon Coleman standpoint. He's just too limited. And the Bills right now, especially being 6-3, fighting for a playoff spot, still trying to claw back in the division, they do not have the luxury of having a guy get time on task at the top of the depth chart for a passing offense that's struggling. They don't have that luxury. Whether or not that's fair to Keon Coleman, we're past that. Sorry. Like that, it is what it is. They can't keep living in that space. So more Curtis Samuel, more Elijah Moore, more juice, more capability, more route running, more potential to stretch the field, create some threat for all 3 levels of the defense, and make the defense have to honor things that they really haven't been honoring the past couple of weeks or this season for the Bills' weapons. So that's number 2 for improvements or hopes. My notes just went away because I accidentally scrolled up. Cole Bishop continuing to get better. Max Hairston continuing to get better. If they can keep making splash plays while they're doing that, that's awesome. But if they continue to each raise their floors and mitigate the mistakes and the holes and the blown coverages or the mistakes in technique or eyes, that in and of itself is awesome. But if they can continue making splash plays while raising the floor, goodness gracious. And then less predictability on offense is a big one, like I talked about, for a multitude of reasons, from a schematic standpoint, personnel standpoint, run concepts, pass concepts, players they use, under center, shotgun, first downs, play action, all of that. Last little piece here. I'm just going to mention it. I wasn't going to do a whole segment on it. Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane. I've talked about it before on the show. I'm still at the same spot. If Sean McDermott goes, fine. If he stays, fine. My answer is always, if Sean McDermott goes, or someone who says Sean McDermott sucks, get him out. Okay, who are you replacing him with? And if the answer is always just like, oh, it doesn't matter, he's so terrible, he sucks, that's not true. I think Sean McDermott is a better than average coach in this league. I like that he's taking over the defense more. This defense has been much better since he took over, even with having to play practice squad guys and bench guys and depth guys and having them play critical roles. They're a much better defense with him calling the defense and running the defense. I would like to see that more. I'd like to see him tap into that and lean into that more. But if you want Sean McDermott gone, I get it. And I understand. I just want to know who you're replacing him with. And I also want you to know that whoever you replace him with, it's not a guarantee that it's better. And if your thought is that's fine because Sean McDermott's never going to get over the hump, I get it. more power to you. I just think the grass isn't always greener on the other side. This is a bigger conversation for another episode. I do have some of the issues with the roster building of this team. I don't know how much of it is Beane versus Sean McDermott. If you watch this show regularly, you already know how I feel, especially from an offseason standpoint. The guys that I want them to draft, the free agents that I want them to go after. Yeah, it's scary at times for me with how frustrated I get with how they refuse to kind of change or tweak things for some of their archetypes. But I don't know how much of it is Beane. I don't know how much of it is McDermott. I know Beane has had misses. I also know he's had hits. I also know that nobody bats 1,000. If you want Beane gone, I get it. I understand. And I extend that same thing to McDermott. I am fine either way. I just don't think the grass is necessarily going to be as green on the other side as everybody thinks it may be. And with this comment here, and I'm guessing this is a reference to McDermott based on when you sent it. But do you trust him to get us over the hump? I don't know, honestly. You know what? I probably lean no. And I'll say it from the hump, from like a big game standpoint. Like if you get to an AFC championship, I'm sitting there and I'm like, is McDermott going to make a mistake? That's how I kind of feel. But I tell you at the same time, on the opposite side, with him fully running the defense, I trust him to run a really good defense in the playoffs, especially if he's running it. And now, this is a good comment here from Jason. I've been watching Seattle almost every week. I love what Clint Kubiak is doing. I like that idea, right? I like the idea of taking someone who runs an offense or a scheme that I really like and then putting him as head coach. So I could understand that a little bit. Craig says Gruden, absolutely not. Not even necessarily from an on the field standpoint, from an off the field person standpoint, absolutely not. For me personally, if you think the schematic stuff is there or it outweighs personal stuff, but for me, absolutely not. No way, shape, or form. I do not want him to be the head coach of my favorite football team or any football team, but that might be just me. Jason said, yeah, Clint Kubiak. I like Clint Kubiak, but your point, he may be a good replacement, but unproven. We don't know. Clint Kubiak might be an awesome offensive coordinator. He might be like Josh McDaniels and be a terrible head coach. Like, that's, again, what it is with everything. It is risk reward. The grass is not always greener on the other side. Even, again, I like Clint Kubiak. Or if, the rumors are that Green Bay might fire Matt LaFleur, I'd take Matt LaFleur. I'd take Clint Kubiak. Even though LaFleur has actual track record as a head coach and a pretty good one, although they haven't gotten over the hump, it's still not a guarantee that this team would be better with LaFleur at the helm or Kubiak at the helm, or if they had brought Lou Anarumo in. Like, there's so much meh with all of that you don't know. There's so many variables and so many questions, which is the reason why I never get fully on board with, fire him, get him out, especially with the track record that they've had, right? I know how important it is to get over the hump. I know how important it is to win the Super Bowl. That's the goal, right? But to do that, you still got to get to the playoffs every year. You still got to beat a bunch of the better teams that you play in your schedule in the regular season. You still ideally got to win your division. And Sean McDermott has done that kind of year in and year out. My big thing that I've always said, I will fully get on board and lean into fire McDermott once the culture starts to erode. And if it seems like this team is going in a direction like they've shown glimpses of this year where they're undisciplined or they're unfocused or the effort isn't there or the energy isn't there or the preparation and the commitment isn't there, that's a different thing. If the culture starts to erode and if it seems like Sean McDermott has lost the plot a little bit with this team, that's when, for me, it starts to go. Because and again, I hate using this example because, he's now regarded as one of the best coaches of all time. The conversations that people are having in Buffalo right now about Sean McDermott was times 1,000 in Philly for Andy Reid. Philly could not wait to run Andy Reid out of Philadelphia. And then Kansas City wanted to run him out too. And all of a sudden, you got Pat Mahomes and everything changed. And now you could say the same. Well, Sean McDermott got Josh Allen and that didn't happen. Yeah, but he's kind of just running to the Chiefs who happen to be better. And I think that's part of it too. Like, Sean McDermott's failures year in and year out are really because he's going against one of the best head coaches of all time and a generational quarterback who's the best quarterback of his generation. And you got to get past those dudes. But I also understand not being able to get past those dudes. I mean, Dan Marino is arguably the best quarterback of all time, and Shula was one of the greatest coaches of all time. They couldn't get past the Bills in the 90s. It's just, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough. And everybody's always unproven until they become proven. Now Andy Reid's one of the greatest coaches of all time. Before that, he was the biggest choker of all time. And 2 cities almost ran him out of town. It's conversational. And it's interesting. This is also an interesting one, too. I wanted to grab this comment. Do you trust Pagula to hire the right person? He said, I would think he would pick McCarthy. This is also in the back of my mind, too, because of how much of a dumpster fire the Sabres are. And I know Pagula might be like, he likes hockey more and he's invested more, whatever the hell. I don't want him to get more involved with the football team. I think he's not. I think he lets Beane and McDermott run the ship because he trusts them to run the ship. I'm fearful of them going, or one of them going, and him inserting himself a little bit more. So I don't want that to happen. I don't necessarily know if he would hire the right person. I'm more concerned about that in secondary to would he get himself involved, and that scares me a little bit. Now, maybe it wouldn't happen because he's more of a hockey guy than he is a football guy, but I see what's going on with the Sabres, and that terrifies me that it could also happen to the Bills because it's the same owner and it could result in the same way, and that scares me. That scares me. And also, like, this is a good comment from Gary. Gary says, I trust McDermott as much as Josh to win it all for better or for worse. I think that's a fair comment, too, and doesn't get brought up enough. I know Allen has had some great performances in the playoffs, and the defense has let them down. He's also had some poor performances and some bad starts where the defense has kept him alive before he turned it on. It's just, there's just so many variables to put it all on McDermott. But I understand those who do, and I understand those who kind of want him out. I get it. RJ says, when Andy was fired, I wanted the Bills to get him so bad he wouldn't even talk to management here. Yeah, that's very fair that he didn't want to come to Buffalo at that time. But yeah, the Eagles were sitting there being like, man, he keeps winning the division. He keeps going to the NFC Championship, but he can't get over the hump. And all the fans were like, screw him. We hate him. We want him out. And they waited for that first year where they struggled a bit, and they sent him out the door. Then he goes to Kansas City, turns them into a regular AFC West contender. They're going to the playoffs every year. But between Alex Smith, Matt Castle, they're not getting over the hump. And everybody in Kansas City was literally I forgot who did it. I think Joe Goodberry did it. The guy who does all the breakdowns for the Bengals. He found stuff a couple years ago. Like, he went down, I don't know how he found it, but like Chiefs Twitter. And the year before they got Mahomes, like, so many people were like, Andy Reid is awful. Andy Reid is the worst. This team will never go anywhere with Andy Reid. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough. And just because someone hasn't done it doesn't mean they can't. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. For all we know, Sean McDermott is the next Andy Reid, and he could leave the Bills and go somewhere else and win a bunch of rings, or maybe he can stay here and win a bunch of rings, and you're just waiting for the right shoe to drop at the right time. I don't think there's a right answer. If you think Sean McDermott's awesome and he should stay, cool. If you think Sean McDermott's terrible and he is holding this team back and you think he should get the boot, cool. I just think there's too many variables to have a concrete, hard-lined answer. And also, so this comment here, like, but Reid is capitalized on Mahomes in his prime. McD hasn't been able to do that 8 years in. Andy Reid has also had Spags. Andy Reid has been able to just solely do offense while having one of the greatest defensive coordinators of all time and one of the greatest matchup defensive coordinators of all time. I don't think Sean McDermott has ever had a Spags on offense. And maybe he can get one. I don't think he's had that. Oh, there we go. Ah, that's funny. This comment literally came in right now. Let's not forget it's Reid with Spags. McDermott could use a Spags level assistant coach. That's the thing, right? Like, for me, can McDermott get a Spags on the offensive side of the ball? That's part of the reason why I want McDermott to run the defense. Run the defense and get yourself a guy on the offensive side that could just run the whole ship. That's been so important to the Chiefs. Andy Reid can just do offensive stuff because Spags runs the whole defense. Like, that's a huge piece as well. So for as much as it's been Reid and Mahomes, Spags has made a huge difference. And I don't think McDermott has ever had a Spags on the offensive side of the ball. Now, whether or not that's McDermott's fault, whether or not, how much that falls onto him and or Beane, if you want to throw that in there too, fair enough conversation. I just think that's a lot of variables. And then you follow a fair question, but is that on McDermott and Beane to have found that person by now? Like, it's hard to trust even that anymore. I think that's fair, but also, like, How many other teams haven't found their Spags, or haven't found their Andy Reid, or haven't found their, who's a great offensive coordinator before, they haven't found like their Nick Sirianni at that time? Like, for as many Spags as are out there, there's 10 times, 20 times the amount of defensive coordinators that just straight up fail. Like, not even just like, is that on McD and Beane to have found that person by now? How about every other team that hasn't found their person by now? Right? It's tough. It's tough to find some like coordinator or coach that is truly the right guy. That's why so many coaches get fired. That's why so many coordinators get fired, because it's hard. It's not necessarily a crapshoot like the draft is, but it's tough. You could put that on Beane and McDermott for not finding like that person by now, but you can do the same thing for every other team in the NFL who hasn't found that guy on one side of the ball or the other. That's why the Chiefs, it's so crazy, because they have Reid and they have Spags. Like, they found both, and they have the generational quarterback. And on top of that, what's even crazier with the Chiefs is neither of them have left, because Spags doesn't want to be head coach. He hasn't gone anywhere. Like the Ravens, it was like, oh man, Todd Monken and Mike McDonald. McDonald's gone, and he goes to be a head coach in Seattle. Usually, when you have a great coordinator, they get plucked to go be a head coach somewhere else. And the Chiefs have not had that. That is so unique and so rare that it's just been those two for the whole time on each side of the ball, which is also a rarity, which is also why it's tough to compare. Again, there's so many variables. That's why it's fun to have this conversation, or not so fun, depending on how you look at it. But you can play devil's advocate to either side. I think these are really good questions. That's a good point. You said another one. Let me read it. Do you think there is a reason exceptional coaching talent may not want to come here? We have no idea if they've tried. I would just think people would want to flock to work with Josh. I don't think exceptional coaching talent doesn't want to come here. But to your point, we have no idea who has denied coming here, who hasn't wanted to come here. But I do think from an offensive standpoint, a ton of people would flock to want to work with Josh. But also, if you look at the last two pieces or two hires, Dorsey was internal and then Joe Brady was internal. So usually you want to lean internal more than external, one. But two, I also think, not to give McDermott or Beane a pass at all, right? Josh Allen had some influence here. There's no way in hell, especially with Brady, but even with Dorsey too, there is no way in hell that the Bills hired Ken Dorsey as their offensive coordinator and hired Joe Brady as their offensive coordinator if Josh Allen wasn't like, yep, I want those guys. There is no way in hell. Maybe, again, we can play devil's advocate on these sides. Maybe they wanted a different guy from the outside. And maybe Allen was like, nope, I want these guys. And they were like, okay, we'll go with what Allen wants. I don't know. We don't know. And yeah, see, you're saying like, it's like they want to surround themselves with inferior, inexperienced talent almost as a way to protect themselves. I don't think that's the case at all. I think they like to promote from within. They like to maintain consistency with who knows the team and who knows the building. And I also think, again, Allen had say in there. There's no way they're going to hire any offensive coordinator if Josh Allen is not on board with it. There's no way. So as much as we can blame Beane and McDermott, or you could say, well, they're the head coaches, they need to overrule him. That's absolutely fair. But we maybe have to blame Allen too a little bit, because I guarantee Allen co-signed, if not advocated for both of those hires. And I don't think they want to surround themselves with inferior, inexperienced talent. They want a ring. Sean McDermott is ultra competitive. Ultra competitive. There is no way in hell Sean McDermott is willing to hire inferior or inexperienced talent to make himself look better if it means he's not going to win. I just don't buy that. He's way too competitive for that, as most dudes are in the NFL. I don't think he's that type of dude. He wants to win very, 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 very badly. It just hasn't worked out for a multitude of injuries, unfortunately. And this is a good question. Saying, is that a control issue from McDermott or just a Josh influence? I don't necessarily think it's a control issue. I do think if you're anybody, even if you're a business that isn't like a football team, usually you want to promote from within, right? Like you have people who already know the system. You have people who already know your ways and how you work. You've got people who are comfortable and known. You have a known quantity there. There's limited unknowns. And it also sends a good message to the rest of your organization. Like, hey, we promote from within. So if you grind at your job, you can get bumped just like Timmy did and Joey did and boom, 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 and all that stuff. So I don't know. You could make the case that it's a control issue. I just think it's more familiarity and known quantity and promoting from within and a bit of a Josh influence as well. That's fair. I just want to rage and blame them for everything right now. Laugh out loud. So frustrated. I get it, man. Everybody needs like a conduit or a medium for their frustration and a vehicle for it. I get it. But no, I appreciate you saying thank you for answering my questions. Thank you for being here and for asking questions. I appreciate you. Yeah, I don't think it's an easy answer for everything with McDermott, Beane. I see the comments on Dable. I spoke about it a bit earlier. I don't know if he's the savior that everybody's making him out to be. I do like the idea of, having somebody on that side of the ball that can completely run the entire side by himself. I'm not completely out on Brady yet. I never thought Brady was as good as everyone made him out to be, just like I never thought Ken Dorsey was as bad as everyone made him out to be. But Dable has his warts as well. I feel like everybody's forgetting the struggles the offense had at times under him, and how there were people who wanted him out the way they wanted Brady and Dorsey out. But again, time heals all wounds. Yeah, I would love them just to get a Spags on that side of the ball. And it could be Dable. It could be somebody else. I don't know. It's tough. There's so many variables. You're dealing with people. There's so many variables. Nature versus nurture, environments, ecosystems, injuries, getting the right players at the right time, staying healthy, the right system, the right fit, the right development, the right timeline, the right development pattern. There's so many variables. Just to narrow it down to one person or one thing is the problem. It's just tough for me. It's tough for me. Yeah. And Jason, this is what kind of end on this. Jason says, I think that hiring coordinators from within has been proven to be a mistake. Josh deserves a better OC. I think that's fair. But also, again, if Josh wants a guy from within, what are you going to do? I understand you're running the ship and you're in charge, but if your franchise quarterback, the MVP, one of your guys that run this franchise, actually backtrack, the guy, if he comes to you and says, I want this guy from within, what are you doing? Because Josh might deserve a better OC, but Josh thinks he deserves this OC or he wants this OC. Again, there's no way he didn't sign off on Dorsey and Brady. And I don't know if, maybe that was icing on the cake and they were already leaning towards Dorsey and Brady. And once he said yes, they were like, oh, great, perfect. We don't have to clash because that's what we wanted. Or maybe they took his direction. Maybe they wanted somebody from the outside. Again, we don't know. I'm throwing out, theories and hypotheses, which is fun, but we don't know. Josh may want internal guys. For as much as McDermott and Beane want it, it might be Josh's call more so than we think. We don't know. I like this. Josh has failed in picking an OC twice now. He doesn't get a choice. I think that's fair. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough telling your star that he can't get what he wants, or the guy who's running the show, he can't get what he wants. If that's even happening. Again, I don't know. There's so many variables. It's hard to just whittle it down to one thing and be like, this is the problem. This is what happened. Change this thing and everything else will be better. Butterfly effect, man. There's a multitude of things that can happen from the tiniest change, but it makes it fun conversation. You know what else is fun conversation? Talking about the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. That is One Pie Pizza. If you have not had One Pie Pizza, you are doing yourself a disservice. The best pizza in Buffalo, New York. I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I truly think they are the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. It's absolutely phenomenal. They have a pizza that's named after the show and named after the brand. It's called the Cover One Allen Goat. It is amazing. They do breakfast pizzas. They do some really good salads. They have a catering division called Elevated Catering of Buffalo. That is also phenomenal. If you're doing an event or any type of activity that you need catering done for, you should hire them. They awesome mac and cheeses, delicious salads, main dishes, chickens, rices, a whole bunch of stuff. You can also get pizza as well. Like, just really phenomenal stuff. And I also, as I always mention, they're good people on top of it. So you got good people making good food, all the initiatives they have for the community, for the city at large, including one that's coming up very soon, Toys for Tots. I am pressing them for details as we go forward here in terms of what the prizes are for this year, but usually how it goes. however many toys you drop off, that's how many tickets you get entered into a raffle. And those raffle tickets give the opportunity to win a various amount of prizes. So in-store One Pie stuff like free pizza and different levels of that, but also usually times a lot of sports merch. So like autographed Bills memorabilia, Sabres tickets, sometimes Bills tickets, just a lot of awesome stuff. And, even besides that, just, giving toys for the holidays. I say it all the time. I love Christmas. I love the holiday times. It's one of my favorite times of year. Like I know it is for a lot of people, but Christmas and the holidays suck for a lot of people and for kids. And it's really awesome to go to One Pie and see all these bins that are filled with toys, and to know that those toys are going to go to families or, directly to kids, or go to families and parents who can give them to their kids. It's just a really awesome time. And again, that's also, even if you're not doing it at One Pie, giving what you can or donating what you can in the holiday season. I know it's tough in this economy with everything that's going on, but if you have the capacity to give, it's awesome. And I advocate for it a lot. So whether you're doing it through One Pie or anyone else, Toys for Tots is awesome. Donating and being charitable is awesome. And if you do it through One Pie, you get the opportunity to get some amazing food and some awesome gift and merch if that's your type of vibe. I feel like we can honestly keep going with this episode for a very long time. These 2 hours have flown by. I didn't think this episode was going to go that long. I should have known, because I'm me and this show is this show, and you guys are you guys in the chat. This was awesome. I had a ton of fun. Before anyone leaves, as we start to wind down here, please, 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 thank you. Drop a like here on this video if you have not already. We've been rolling pretty steady with live viewers throughout this episode. We're at about 51 likes right now. I hate shilling out for it and mention it because I feel like a sellout and it's mad corny, but likes are the lifeblood of these streams. So if you have not already, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video, whether you're watching live now here on YouTube or watching later on YouTube. It's extremely helpful to myself and the entire team and channel here when it comes to the algorithm and anything and everything with that. So please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like here on this video on YouTube. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool too. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage. Turn on notifications for the Disguised Coverage playlist here on YouTube. Subscribe to the Cover One channel. Check out the multitude of content we have across the entire brand. And yeah, this was a really awesome time. I hope you folks had a really a good time here. I see all the also remember equal amount of blueberries. Absolutely. Great comment. Love that. I see a lot of the kind words coming in from myself now. I appreciate them very much. As you folks know, especially if you're regular viewers, I don't pull up the kind words for myself at the end, because especially if I'm by myself, because it seems corny, but I see them and I sincerely appreciate them a lot. I also noticed a bunch of, positive stuff for myself on the show coming throughout the rest of the episode. So thank you very much for that. And thank you very much to everybody who tuned in live. It's awesome, especially when I ride solo, to have the engagement and the back and forth and the questions. It almost makes me feel like I don't need to provide any notes ahead of time, and I can just come in and sit around and wait for you guys to go back and forth with each other and myself. And we just have a large scale discussion around scheme and structure and evaluation, which is always really cool. So thank you very much for being here. If you tuned in live, if you didn't and you're watching post live, that's awesome too. Thank you very much for your listen, your view, your download, I said listen, view, download, whatever you got, whatever form or fashion your consumption comes in. I greatly appreciate it. And I thank you for it. Thank you very much to Rick for your super chat earlier in the night. That was awesome. And and after dark, the pod after the pod. I like that. That's funny. Yeah, I appreciate you folks. This was an awesome time. Thank you very much for the kind words. I'm glad you folks enjoyed the show. I hope you continue to enjoy the show and myself. If you were here live and you had a question, thought, comments, concern, or anything that I did not get to or didn't pull up, I apologize. Get at me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro2_ANT. Get at me on Blue Sky at proant. No underscores there, just PRO8ANT. Post at me, tweet at me, DM me. If you're an insider, Cover One insider, DM me in the Discord. That's the easiest way to get at me there. Put a comment into the comments on YouTube once this episode gets finalized. I'll answer your question there. I always try to do a great job of going through everything after. And yeah, thank you folks very much for tuning in. I appreciate you. Thank you to everybody who tuned in live, watch post live, listen post live, whatever have you. This Bills team is a roller coaster this year. We will see what happens as we go forward, but whatever happens, I'll be here every single week to talk about it, the good and the bad and everything and anything in between. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you when I see you. Godspeed. And as always, Go Bills.